All right. Hey everyone. So we are picking up where we left off from last time, now talking about numeric summaries. So, like, finally, the good part, the numbers, the cool stuff. Um, and so, what we're going to do first is we have this kind of nice table of different summary statistics, and we're going to label them on the dot plot that we saw in the last video. And so after we label them, then we'll talk about what each of these things are. You might recognize some of these, like the mean is the most common that you may have seen before, but we will talk about each of them. And so if I go to our dot plot, I'm just going to go from left to right and label the min first. So that's the minimum value. I'm going to see that Q1 is 3. We don't really know what that is yet, but I'm still going to label it. So 3 is right there. The median is 7, and the mean is about 10. So the median is here, and then the mean is where that first grid line is going to be. And then we've just got Q3 and the maximum. I already forgot. Q3 is 16, the maximum is over here at 64. So max Q3. All right, the last thing given here is n, and n is what we're usually going to call the sample size, which is just how many players are in our data set. In this case, there were 436. All right, so now that we've got all of this stuffs labeled, let's go ahead and talk about what each of those things actually mean. And we're going to start by talking about measures of center. And so again, if you've seen this before, that's kind of nice because it's just review. But this class doesn't have any sort of prereqs or anything, so we assume that you actually haven't seen any of this stuff before. And so the mean, the definition, you just take all of the numbers, so this is a numeric variable, you're going to add them up and then divide by the sample size. And so we almost never want to compute these summary statistics by hand, but just to kind of see what it would look like, I'm back on page 1. If we started computing the mean home runs, we would have 6, and then 10, and then 21. And then we would go through all 436 players. So that's what this kind of ... is meant to indicate. After we went through all 436 players, we divide by the sample size. So that's 436. Obviously, that's like a huge pain in the butt. And so we're never actually going to do that by hand. Instead, we're going to use either statistical software eventually later in the semester, or the table will just be provided and we'll need to interpret some of these numbers. All right, and so another super common measure of center is the median. And so the median is just if you were to order all of the numbers and then find the number in the middle. So you're ordering all of the home runs from smallest to largest and finding the number that's exactly in the middle after you order them. So in this baseball example, you could kind of think about it as, so the median is the number such that 50% of the players hit fewer home runs than that number. And then just by default, 50% of the players hit more home runs. All right, so median you could think about like if you being right in the middle. So I don't know why this popped into my head, but if you remember in like when you were younger, you might have had to like run a mile in school. If you had the median time, then that means that you were faster than exactly 50% of the kids in your class, and you were also slower than 50% of the kids in your class. All right, so in this particular example, we kind of see that the mean is larger than the median. And so we'll talk a little bit later about why that is and what consequences that kind of has for our interpretations. And so the final measure of center is the mode. And so this one we're really not going to use a ton, so we're just going to kind of gloss over it pretty quickly, but it's the most common number in the data set. So the number that appears the most. We see in our dot plot that it looks like this stack is kind of the highest right here, and so that means that the mode for this example is 3. Again, this isn't super common. It doesn't even usually appear in like a table of summary statistics, so for the most part, we'll just be thinking about the mean and median. All right, so a couple of the other summary stats in that table that we'll just talk about just super quickly for a sec, because they're pretty easy, is the minimum, which is just the smallest value of a variable. We saw in that baseball example that the minimum is 0. You can't hit fewer than 0 home runs, and there were players that didn't have any home runs. The maximum is the largest value. We saw that random Batista guy, I guess he's not random, he's probably super famous, but he hit like 54 home runs, and so that's the max. Sample size, which we're denoting usually as n, just by convention, that is 436, and that is the number of cases in the data set. All right, and so we'll pick up in the next video talking about what Q1 and Q3 were, because those appeared in that summary table, and then talk about some measures of spread.